But we're going to start in the NBA. Say hello to DraftKings contributor Gary and Thorne, along with RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Fellas, like I said, just a 2-game slate tonight, but it's got James Harden taking on the Nets for the first time since the blockbuster deal that sent him to Philly. So we won't see Ben Simmons for Brooklyn. He still isn't game ready. But since the game is in Philly, Kyrie Irving will be able to play. So a lot of stats to choose from and a lot of narrative. So Garion, who are you making your captain in this showdown tonight?
Well, I feel like we almost have to specify that we will physically see Ben Simmons because for whatever reason, they're going to have him sit on the bench in Philadelphia and not play in this game.
God.
Which I believe one Philadelphia beat writer described it as being a sitting target, which that sounds super fun for Ben Simmons. So I think this is a great decision on the part of the the Brooklyn Nets front office management team. Yeah, look, it's going to be the chalk, and I understand that, but I think I have to lean Harden here. I mean, a motivated James Harden is one of the scariest NBA players that we have in our league, and he's going to be motivated tonight. And he's just been playing motivated since he got to Philadelphia, and we've seen what the results have been. The usage has taken a pretty sizable dip. I mean, he is not generally speaking, a 24% usage guy, but we knew that would happen playing alongside Joel Embiid. But the other areas of his game that have ticked up to such a degree that it really does make up for any loss we've seen in scoring. This is someone who's got a 54% assist rate since he joined the Philadelphia 76ers. He is averaging 21.8 potential assists per game, which doesn't just lead basketball in that span of time. It leads by quite a large margin. So at this point, we're kind of looking at someone who's just a walking double-double. If he's actually motivated to put up a couple more points tonight in his return, well, not a return, but in his first game against his old team, I just think the ceiling is higher for him than it is for any other player on this slate.
Nick, he's going to cost you $18,600 in the captain spot, but do you just have to eat the chalk here?
Yeah, you certainly can. I mean, there's an argument to be made when I was kind of playing around with lineups this morning that, putting Kyrie at captain, who of course is coming off of a 50-point effort against the Hornets earlier this week, that gives you a little bit more flexibility. You're saving, I think, $900 versus going with Harden. And in that build, you can still fit two of Embiid, Kevin Durant, and James Harden in your lineup along with Kyrie at the captain spot. So for me, that's the key is, you want to get at least three of those four because both of these teams are so top heavy. And at least Philly, has Tobias Harris and has Tyrese Maxey, who also contribute. But with Brooklyn, I mean, after KD and Kyrie, on any given night, there's going to be a third guy and kind of a fourth guy who contributes. But finding out who that's going to be is really difficult. Some nights it could be Seth Curry if he's shooting well. Other nights it could be Andre Drummond if he grabs 17 rebounds. But, the rotation at center has kind of been all over the place. So choosing those mid to lower tier options is going to be really tough. I think you have to nail, you have to have the right 3 stars in your lineup. And, then you're going to have to fill in with 1 or 2 scrubs at the end. No Danny Green tonight for Philly, which is not that big of a deal for fantasy purposes. Danny Green has essentially fallen off a cliff over the last couple of years as a fantasy player. But that does open up more minutes for guys like Matisse Thybulle, Isaiah Joe, maybe even Furkan Korkmaz. So those are some guys to consider if you're looking to pair one of those lower cost options with one of your higher cost captains.
All right, well, more drama. Kevin Durant responded to someone on Twitter yesterday who was upset with his performance on Tuesday against the Hornets. He said, "When them parlays don't hit, this is for years of slander from NBA fans. I'm grateful I have this much power now." Okay, so he only put up 14 points while Kyrie Irving put up 50. Apparently, Durant's underwhelming performance lost this man his parlay, and he was upset about it. Nick, Twitter feuding aside, are there any trends that we can point to when betting Durant versus Irving props with Harden now out of the picture? And, which props will you have your eye on tonight?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of trends, I just don't really think there's a whole lot to glean there. I mean, the sample, despite these guys playing together for now almost 2 full seasons, the sample is still so small. And you kind of have to go through and look at every single individual game and say, okay, who was eligible for this one? Did Harden play? Did he have a hamstring injury for that one? Was Kyrie eligible? We don't have a very strong sample size of what these guys look like, other than a few just chosen random games essentially over the last 2 years. So no, I don't think there's some sort of trend that you could follow here. I get what you're saying though. I mean, it does kind of seem like they've traded off great games in the very short term. I mean, KD was amazing against Boston on Sunday. Kyrie was quiet in that game. Kyrie, obviously fantastic against Charlotte. KD was quiet in that game, which led to the tweet. So, if you're just looking at those two games, it's easy to say, oh, they just trade off, who plays well or who scores more. But I think we know that both of these guys are more than capable of going for 30 or even 40 each, on the right night. We've seen Kyrie do it plenty of times with LeBron in big spots. Kevin Durant, probably an even easier player to play with and score alongside. So, no, I don't think there's kind of a one or the other situation tonight. If you look at their individual points props, specifically, Durant is at 28.5 tonight. Kyrie's all the way down at 24.5. So, Durant, I would probably go more on that just because it is KD, but 24.5 to me seems really low for a player who's coming off of 50 points and 9 3-pointers in his last game. So, I mean, if I'm going to make Kyrie my captain in the showdown, I think I got to go over on 24.5 points.
All right, Gary, what do you think? Any trends that you've noticed or just not a big enough sample size?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I kind of tried to figure out what exactly were the trends, if there were any, by kind of pooling together. Okay, how many minutes have these guys played together this season without James Harden on the court? And I had to do it like 3 times because I kept getting such a small sample of minutes. I just couldn't believe it. And then you start thinking about it, and it's like Nick said, it's just not like we have this wide swath of data to pull from with these two guys being healthy at the same time and them not having a third star around when they do happen to both be on the court. In that limited sample, I mean, we're talking about just over 100 minutes, which seems crazy at this point in the season. Durant is the one who has the higher usage rate. I mean, considerably higher, actually. It's like 31% to 24% for Kyrie. Durant averages more DraftKings points per minute. So I think if we're talking about, what we can bet on down the road, I would continue to say that in a vacuum, most nights, I will trust Durant to have the better games than Kyrie. But I think what played out in their last contest against Charlotte is something that is bound to happen from time to time, where Kyrie is clearly feeling it. Why would Durant feel like he has to inject himself in that game? I mean, if someone's shooting 9 for 12 from 3-point range, you kind of just keep giving him the ball. So to speak again about what Nick was talking about, I think that both of these guys have the potential to have huge nights, and specifically they can have huge nights playing next to each other because there really isn't that Tyrese Maxey or, that Tobias Harris as a third wheel right now. You've got a bunch of role players who are basically just catch and shoot guys at their best, or rebound and shoot guys and someone like Bruce Brown. So I'm looking at like some of the special props for tonight. I mean, for them to both score over 30 points is plus 600. That's very viable. Like, that could definitely happen. For both of these guys to hit at least 4 3-pointers, definitely a little bit more far-fetched, but still within the realm of possibility for two guys who are going to have as high usage rates as these two players are going to have. That's plus 1,600. So I would probably sprinkle a little bit on both those because they can definitely happen with both these guys healthy and playing at their best.
So Philly is favored by 4.5 points tonight. Who do you like to cover the spread, Garion? The road team has covered the spread in 8 of the Nets' last 9 games.
Yeah, so I would say that like home road splits are important, but maybe not as important as we always make them out to be, except when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, obviously, their road splits are definitely more important and tell you more just because of the availability of Kyrie Irving. And they are 5-1-1 ATS their past 7 road games. At this point, with two teams that are still kind of figuring it out, but are obviously among the most talented in the league on paper. I mean, say what you will about the Nets' current situation in the playoff standings. I'm just going to take the points here. I'll take the 4.5. I think this is going to be a relatively close game. I think Philly is probably the better team. They are at home, but I'm going to take the points in what I think should be a pretty close spot.
Nick, what are you doing here?
Yeah, I've been thinking long and hard about this one. My first intuition is Philly. I think the Nets just have nobody to guard Embiid, and if anything, they gave the Nets the player who Embiid loves going up against most in his former teammate Andre Drummond. So I think Embiid's going to have a huge night. But when you're talking about guys in KD and Kyrie who, like Garion said, not out of the question on this night or any night that they could combine for 60 plus, they're going to keep you in the game. So I don't think this turns into a blowout one way or the other. It's going to be a matter of, how that Ben Simmons vitriol energy ends up being directed. It's like, are the Sixers players going to be in on this? Like, are they going to be coming out all jazzed up, like with Ben Simmons on the bench? Does that lead to them either playing harder or playing more recklessly, where you come out with like too much energy? It's a really hard situation to read because, like Arian said, Simmons is going to be there, but he's not playing. So it's going to be a very strange environment where, the crowd is acting like it would be one of those situations where if he did play, he'd get booed every time he touched the ball, but he's just going to be sitting on the bench. So we really haven't seen, a situation like this as far as what that environment is going to be. But I think chances are Philly ends up feeding off of it. I think they're the much deeper team. They're a team that can withstand, 65 plus points from KD and Kyrie because they have the vastly better third and fourth option. So I'm going to go with Philly here.
All right, one other game tonight, Warriors in Denver to take on the Nuggets. Not as many great storylines to cover in this one, but it should still be a great game. So who are you going to captain in this one, Nick? By far the most expensive option going to be Jokic at $20,400.
Yeah, I mean, you could go with Jokic. It's Denver's fourth game in 5 nights, which you just don't even see anymore in the NBA. And it's because they had that rescheduled game against the Warriors on Monday. And almost any other team in the league would have rested Jokic for at least one of these games. And, of course, he just keeps on trucking. I mean, 38, 18, 7, 2, and 1. Last night had 32, 15, and 3 against Golden State on Monday. I mean, the durability aspect with Jokic continues to be, I think, sneakily his best asset as a player. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of minutes and the amount of workload that he continues to pile up. And all indications are he's going to play in this game. So if you want to go Jokic, obviously that's going to lead to some sacrifices elsewhere on your DK roster. But one build that I was experimenting with this morning that I kind of like is, it's high risk, high reward, but Jordan Poole at captain obviously saves you a ton of money there. And that enables you to then fit Jokic, Curry, and Andrew Wiggins in your lineup. And then the last 2 spots, you could plug in decent role players. You don't have to go all the way to the bottom of the barrel and just hope that Juan Toscano Anderson gives you 15 points. Like, you could plug in Moses Moody, who's been good lately. You could plug in Nemanja Bjelica, who doesn't have the highest ceiling, but at least has a decent floor. So if you want to go away from Jokic, I would consider looking at Poole.
All right, Gary, and what's your strategy here? I mean, Jokic had 77 fantasy points in his last game.
Yeah, he's been over 75 DraftKings points his last 3 games, which is an insane stat that really at this point only Nikola Jokic could pull off. I mean, it's almost gotten to the point where none of his stats surprise me. So when I do find one that kind of like takes my breath away for a second, it's even more impressive. And that stat that I found this morning was that without Will Barton on the court, and we don't yet know what the status of Barton is going to be for this game, I would assume he's questionable. And if he's not ruled questionable, he's just going to be ruled out for this contest. But without Barton this season, he is averaging 1.92 DraftKings points per minute, because he just has to take on that little bit more of an offensive workload. I mean, it is insane what he is doing right now. So, again, we don't have to spend too much time talking about why Nikola Jokic is viable on any given slate. He's always viable. It doesn't matter what the price point is. But if you do want a cheaper option at captain, as Nick was kind of alluding to, I think one option that I really like, and it's sort of because of Nikola Jokic in a weird way, is Kevon Looney. Golden State just does not have a lot of center depth. They don't have a lot of guys who can, I mean, no one can defend Nikola Jokic, but who can at least stand there and try. And we've seen this matchup 2 times since the trade deadline. And in those 2 games, Kevon Looney is averaging almost 29 minutes per game, which is well above his seasonal averages. And he's also averaging 13 points, 10 rebounds, and 36 DraftKings points in those 2 games, just because he's on the court. Centers, when they are on the court, always pile up fantasy points. So I think Looney's in a pretty nice spot. I think if we find out again that Barton's not playing, that Bones Highland isn't playing, that Monte Morris, who's been in a really nice run his last 3 games, he could also be viable as a captain. But yeah, it goes Jokic and then a bunch of mid-tier plays that could work out. Obviously, Jokic is your safest path here.
All right, real quick on this one, guys, running out of time. Nuggets have won all 3 matchups this season, but the games have been relatively close. So, Gary, and who covers tonight?
This feels like a trap. I hate this line so much. It's begging you to take Denver as a home dog, despite the fact that they are 9-1 in their last 10 games, and Golden State is 3-7 and has a negative net rating over that span of time. I'm going to take Denver because it makes sense. But again, this line is so fishy.
Nick, you feeling fishy here?
Yeah, I feel like we're being victimized by this line, like Arian said. But I'm going to go the other way and take the Warriors. I mean, the 4 games in 5 nights thing, like, it has to run out at some point, and I think Jokic still has a monster game. The Warriors have just played like such ridiculously uninspiring basketball, but they are the one team where their superstar point guard can have a terrible game, and they still end up winning somehow by 15. So, I would love to say I think Curry has a huge bounce back, but he might not even need to. I think Denver is going to be super tired. Bones Highland, Will Barton, Jeff Green, all those guys didn't play last night. They're all questionable. Could be kind of a shorthanded crew behind Jokic. So, very weird line for sure, but I'll take the Warriors to cover on the road.